what it truly meant to be someone's placeholder. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said I was in love, deeply, completely, almost foolishly. I thought what I had with Franklin was the kind of partnership people write novels about. I was his steady ground, his second chance. I didn't realize I was only a bridge, something to be crossed once he was ready to return to the chaos he called love. For 3 years, I built my life around him. When his car broke down, I co signed the loan so he wouldn't lose his job. When his mother got sick, I took him to every appointment, made soup, and stayed up through the night while he cried quietly beside her hospital bed. When his credit cards overflowed with debt, I helped him build a budget, promising, "We'll get through this." I said we a lot back then. He never corrected me, but I think he knew it was never we. It was me carrying both of us, hoping one day he'd notice. The cracks began small like hairline fractures in glass. A locked photo album on his phone labeled "Before." A faint, almost wistful smile when he stared out the window too long. A name I'd heard but never spoken aloud, Sienna. Once I'd caught him scrolling through old pictures, and I asked as gently as I could, "What are you looking at?" He'd turned his screen away and smiled. "Just memories, Elle. Don't worry, I didn't push. I trusted him. I thought trust was proof of love. It wasn't. It was a blindfold." The real break came 2 weeks ago. I was cooking his favorite lemon butter chicken. He walked in pale and distracted, clutching his phone like it was burning him. "Franklin." "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't look at me when he said it. "Sienna's out." I stopped stirring the sauce. The name hung between us, heavy alive again. "Out," I repeated. "You mean prison?" He nodded. "Early release. Time served. She messaged me." The pan hissed. My stomach turned cold. "Franklin," I said carefully, "that's not a door you need to reopen." He flinched, as if I'd struck him. "You don't understand what we had." "What you had," I said softly, "was fraud and heartbreak. She stole from you." He slammed the phone onto the counter. "You don't know her. You don't know what she was going through. She was lost. And I failed her." The words stung more than I expected. I failed her. Not she failed me. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, hands trembling over the pan, realizing that the woman who broke him still owned a piece of him I could never reach. The next days were a blur of small absences. He smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't watching. He went to bed later, woke up earlier, always with a faint smell of whiskey and guilt. The man I had saved was slipping back into the arms of the woman who'd destroyed him, and he didn't even see it. Then came the night of the storm. He stumbled home late, his breath sharp with alcohol, his eyes wild and restless. "You're always so perfect," he muttered, leaning against the doorway. "So composed. Everything in its place. So boring." I set down the book I was reading. "Franklin, you're drunk. Go to bed." He laughed bitterly. There it is, the calm voice, the therapist tone. "Do you ever get angry, Ruby? Do you ever feel anything?" I stood up slowly. "I feel plenty. I just don't scream it." He grabbed a glass from the counter, set it down too hard. It shattered. "You don't get it," he said, eyes glassy. "You make life too easy, too safe. With Sienna, it was real. It was fire." The words hit me like a slap. "Fire," I repeated quietly. "The woman who drained your savings and got you arrested. That's your version of real." He looked at me, then really looked, and I saw the moment he decided to twist the knife. His voice steadied, cruelly calm. "I've always loved her," he said. "You were just the placeholder, Ruby, a safe place to land until she got her life together." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my heartbeat, the rain against the window, the faint hum of the fridge, all of it louder than my own breath. He waited for a reaction. Maybe he wanted me to scream, to throw something, to beg him not to go. But I didn't. I simply walked past him into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and began to pack. One bag, a week's worth of clothes, my documents, my phone charger. I didn't take anything he'd given me. Those things weren't mine. They belonged to the woman he thought I was. He followed me, his voice shaky. "What are you doing?" I didn't look at him. "Leaving. Just like that." "Yes," I said, zipping the bag. "You've made it clear I was temporary. I'm just honoring my role." When I reached the door, he was standing there, confused, almost frightened. "Ruby, wait. We need to talk about this." I looked him in the eyes one last time. No, Franklin. You talked. You told me everything I needed to know. I opened the door. The storm outside had eased into a drizzle, but the air smelled clean, sharp new. As I stepped out, he called after me, his voice breaking. So that's it. I turned slightly, met his gaze. Yes, I said softly. That's it. And then after a beat, good luck with your fire. The door clicked shut behind me. The sound was so small, but it echoed like thunder. I walked through the rain to my car, my bag heavy, my body shaking, not from sadness, but from release. The windshield blurred with water and light as I drove away, leaving the ghost of a home behind. That night, in a silent hotel room that smelled faintly of bleach and cold air, I waited for the pain to come, the heartbreak, the grief, the collapse. But it didn't. All I felt was stillness, the kind that comes after a storm when the world stops spinning. I stared at the ceiling, whispering to the dark I wasn't his foundation. I was his waiting room. And for the first time in 3 years, I slept peacefully. When I woke up the next morning, the silence felt heavier than I expected, not oppressive, just foreign. For years, my days began with Franklin's voice, his half awake grumble about the coffee being too weak, the sound of his toothbrush running longer than mine. Now there was nothing but the low hum of an air conditioner and the faint traffic outside the hotel window. I sat up slowly, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. The sheets were stiff, the light too white, the room too clean. It felt like standing inside a blank page. Maybe that's what freedom really is, not fireworks or epiphanies, but the dull quiet of a new beginning. My phone lit up on the nightstand. 27 missed calls, 15 messages, all from Franklin. At first, I didn't open them. I watched the notifications stack like falling bricks. Then, out of morbid curiosity, I scrolled. Ruby, please. Can we just talk? You don't walk out on someone you love. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. You're overreacting. It wasn't that deep. Elle, don't ignore me. We built a life together. Not a single apology, just bargaining denial and the same emotional gravity that always pulled me back before. But this time, I didn't orbit him. I turned off the notifications, pressed block, and placed the phone face down on the nightstand. The silence that followed was thick, almost holy. By noon, I'd packed again, not out of panic, but purpose. I called the leasing office. The woman on the other end recognized my voice. Oh, the joint lease under Reed and Shepard? Yes, I said. I'd like to terminate my part. She hesitated. That would require legal release from the cosigner. I'll handle that, I replied. And I did. That afternoon, I met Mr. Carter, a calm, precise lawyer in his 50s with kind eyes that didn't pry. I told him everything: the apartment, the car loan, the shared bills. I didn't mention the word placeholder. I couldn't. Not yet. He typed notes in silence, then asked, And what's your reason for separation, Ms. Shepard? I looked out the window of his office, where the city moved briskly beneath us, people rushing, lives continuing. Mine would too. He told me, I said slowly, that I was a placeholder until his ex got her life together. Mr. Carter's fingers stopped tapping. He looked up briefly, his expression softening by a degree. Then I suppose we'll make sure that position is permanently closed. A small, humorless smile tugged at my lips. Please do. When I left the office, the sky was overcast but steady, the kind of gray that promises no surprises. I liked that. Predictable weather. Predictable outcomes. 2 days later, I went back to the apartment while Franklin was at work. I'd arranged with the building manager to unlock the door. Walking inside was like walking into a memory someone else had staged. Everything was neat, untouched, the throw blanket folded, the dishes stacked, the faint scent of my lavender candle still lingering in the air. But it felt lifeless, a set that had already finished filming. I didn't linger. I moved through each room with surgical precision, collecting what was truly mine: a few boxes of books, my laptop, a framed photo of my parents, the kitchen knives my grandmother gave me. I passed our his framed photo on the shelf, us smiling at the beach sunlight painting my hair gold. I looked at that woman, the one in the picture. Her eyes were open, but unseeing. She didn't know she was temporary. I left the frame behind. It belonged to her, the placeholder version of me. When I stepped out of that apartment for the last time, the key in my hand felt heavier than I remembered. I turned it once in the lock, then dropped it into the return envelope and slid it under the door. That small click metal meeting wood was the true goodbye. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. I stood there for a moment, letting it touch my skin before walking to the elevator. My phone buzzed again as I reached the car. A new number this time. I ignored it. I already knew what it would say. That night, I ate dinner alone at a small Thai restaurant near my hotel. I watched people laugh, clink glasses, scroll on their phones, lives in motion. I felt detached but not lonely. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't responsible for anyone's happiness but my own. After dinner, I opened my laptop and started looking for apartments. Something small, quiet with sunlight. No shared lease, no extra keys. The next morning, I found one, a modest studio with wide windows and a single oak tree outside. The listing said ideal for someone starting fresh. I signed the lease within the week. The move in was almost ceremonial. One suitcase, two boxes, no ghosts. I set down my coffee mug, my only coffee mug, on the counter and looked around. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That night, sitting on the floor with takeout, I caught myself smiling. Not because I was happy yet, but because I could finally hear my own thoughts again. I thought about Franklin not with longing, but with a strange, detached clarity. How he'd called my calm suffocating. How he'd craved fire without realizing fire burns everything it touches. And how I had mistaken his chaos for depth. Maybe that was the cruelest part of love, confusing someone's brokenness for passion. As I finished my noodles, the rain started again outside. I didn't flinch at the thunder this time. I listened to it. Each rumble sounded like something old collapsing something necessary. When I went to bed, I left the curtains open. The city lights painted soft reflections on the ceiling, golden, fragile, alive. Before sleep claimed me, I whispered a small promise into the darkness. I won't be anyone's safety net again. The only person I'm saving from now on is me. And for the first time since Franklin said the word placeholder, I didn't feel replaced. I felt reborn. 2 weeks passed before anyone mentioned Franklin again. I had slipped into a rhythm that felt almost like peace, early mornings, quiet breakfasts, and evenings spent unpacking boxes one by one. The stillness of my new apartment was addictive. It was the kind of silence that hummed with safety, not loneliness. Then one morning my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Ruby, it's Leah. I heard you moved out. Just wanted to check in. Leah was one of the few mutual friends I'd actually liked, grounded kind, the type who stayed neutral in other people's drama. I hesitated before replying. I'm okay, I wrote, starting over. She sent 3 dots, then finally, Franklin's not doing well. He's with Sienna again. I stared at the message for a long time, my coffee cooling beside me. The name didn't sting the way it used to. It was just confirmation the plotline I already knew would unfold. That didn't take long, I typed back. Leah's reply came quick. She moved in. He says she's changed. Changed. The most dangerous word in the language of second chances. I closed my phone and went to work. I had clients to meet, designs to submit. My life no longer revolved around whether Franklin ate, slept, or spiraled. But that evening, as I walked home, I found myself glancing at the couples passing by, people laughing, leaning into each other. And a quiet thought surfaced. I used to think that was us. The following weeks brought updates I never asked for. A mutual friend, Ben, called me one afternoon. His tone was strained. Ruby just thought you should know things over there. They're messy, like screaming in parking lots messy. I said nothing. Sienna's back to her old habits. There was some fight about money. He maxed out his credit card again. Cops were almost called. My response was automatic. I'm sorry to hear that. But my voice didn't carry emotion. It sounded mechanical, polite, the way you speak to a stranger about bad weather. That night I deleted Ben's number. I wasn't angry at him. I just didn't need any windows looking into that part of my past. Then one morning, while sipping tea by the window, an old notification blinked across my laptop screen, something I'd completely forgotten existed. A Google alert. I'd set up 2 years ago while helping Franklin build his case against Sienna. New result for Sienna Moore. My heart barely reacted as I clicked it. It was a local police brief. Sienna Moore, 30, and Franklin Reed, 32, were taken into custody for questioning following a reported break-in at a construction site, items seized from their shared apartment pending investigation. I read it once, then again slower. Franklin's name was there, tangled in hers, printed in black and white. The same story playing out only now, with me watching from the shore instead of drowning in it. The first feeling wasn't joy. It was validation, a quiet, almost clinical recognition that I had escaped something inevitable. A few hours later, my phone rang. Another unknown number. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. When I finally listened, I recognized the voice instantly, strained, furious, frantic. I can't believe you, Ruby. I'm in real trouble here, and you're just sitting there doing nothing. They took my laptop. My landlord's threatening to evict me. I admit I messed up, but you're supposed to be the better person. You can't just walk away like this. I listened until the end, then hit delete. No hesitation. I could almost hear my old self, the one who would have driven across town, fixed things, comforted him, cleaned up the wreckage he'd made. But that version of me was gone. She'd left the night I packed that bag. And yet, as the evening light dimmed across the apartment, a thought crept in. He still expected me to be his cure, even after everything he saw me as a solution, not a person. That realization hit harder than the voicemail. The next few days, I walked through the city differently, more aware, lighter. I started going to the gym again, cooking for myself, sleeping without waking to the sound of someone else's bad dreams. When I looked at my reflection in the mirror one morning, I barely recognized myself, not because I'd changed dramatically, but because the weight was gone. The exhaustion of being someone's emotional oxygen had lifted. One evening, I sat at my desk, lit by the orange glow of sunset, and wrote a list on a scrap of paper titled, "Things That Belong Only to Me." I filled it slowly. My mornings. My peace. My kindness when deserved. My boundaries. Then I folded the paper and slipped it into a book on my shelf. A private vow hidden in plain sight. Weeks passed. The news of Franklin and Sienna's arrest became just another forgotten article buried online. But occasionally, when the city grew too quiet, I'd think about him, the boy who needed chaos to feel alive, the man who called love fire. He had gotten his fire back. And for the first time, I didn't feel burned. It started with an email. I was at work editing a project proposal when the notification appeared at the top of my screen. The sender's name froze me for half a heartbeat. Franklin Reed. The subject line read, "I'm broken." I shouldn't have opened it. I knew better. But curiosity is a cruel reflex. I clicked. "Ruby, I know you probably hate me, but I can't stop thinking about you. I'm not okay. Sienna's gone. She left after everything fell apart. I have no money, no place to go. I'm staying in a motel that smells like bleach and regret. You were never a placeholder. I said that because I didn't feel worthy of you. I was scared and I pushed you away. Please, I just need to see you, to talk, to remember that there's still some good left in the world. Yours always, Franklin." I stared at the message for a long moment. If I had read it months earlier, it might have gutted me, all those half-truths disguised as remorse. But now all I saw was manipulation dressed as poetry. The same man who once told me I was too safe now wanted refuge again. I hovered my cursor over reply for a second, not because I wanted to answer, but because I wanted to understand the part of me that once would have, the part that mistook pity for compassion. Then I clicked trash. The sound of the email disappearing into the digital void was oddly satisfying, a soft electronic exhale of closure. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. The city glowed below each light, a small life in motion. I thought about how easy it had been for him to find my email, how no boundary ever really existed with Franklin unless I enforced it. I whispered to the night, "No more rescues." But he wasn't done. 3 days later, another message arrived, not from him this time, but from Leah. "Ruby, please hear me out. Franklin is really falling apart. He's staying with Ben, and it's bad. He talks about you constantly. I know he hurt you, but he's lost everything. Don't let anger harden you like this." My anger, I almost laughed. I wasn't angry, I was free. Still, I called Leah back. She picked up immediately, her voice trembling with a mix of sympathy and judgment. "Ruby, thank God. I was afraid you'd block me too." "I might," I said flatly. "Depends on what this is about." "It's about Franklin," she said, rushing the words. He's not himself. He's drinking again. He's saying things like he wishes he never—" "Leah," I interrupted gently. "Do you think this is the first time he's fallen apart?" "I know, but—" "Do you remember what he told me? That I was a placeholder. That my love was suffocating. And now, after Sienna ruined his life again, he suddenly remembers my worth." There was a pause. I could hear her soft breathing through the phone. "You don't sound angry," she said finally. "I'm not," I said. "I'm indifferent. There's a difference. Ruby, he needs help. Then he can find it in a rehab center, not in me." Her sigh came sharp through the line. "You've changed." "Good," I replied. That was the point. I ended the call before she could respond and blocked her number. The conversation left a faint ache in my chest, not from guilt, but from the realization that people will always try to drag you back into the stories they're comfortable with. In Franklin's story, I was the caretaker, the calm, the constant, but that role had been retired, permanently. The next day, while reorganizing my bookshelf, a small photo fluttered from between two novels. It was one I hadn't realized I'd kept Franklin and me sitting by the lake, sunlight spilling across the water. He was smiling at me, but his eyes were elsewhere. Even in the photograph, he looked like he was waiting for something or someone else. I tore the picture in half and threw it away. The weeks rolled by quietly. Work thrived, sleep came easily, and the silence I once feared became a friend. Then one Friday evening, my phone buzzed again. A number from our old area code. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. Ruby, it's Ben. I know you don't want to hear this, but Franklin's really in a dark place. He's talking about ending things. Maybe if he heard from you. I deleted it before the sentence finished. Because here's what I'd learned when someone tries to weaponize your empathy. Silence is the only shield that works. But silence, I would soon find, is also a test one Franklin was determined to break. The next morning, I was sipping coffee sunlight, warming my face, when my phone rang again. Same area code, different number. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. Hello. There was a pause, then a quiet, trembling voice. Ruby, it's me. Franklin. I said nothing. I'm at the hospital, he continued. I took something. Not enough, I guess. I just couldn't see a way out. They're keeping me for observation. The nurse said to call someone who cares. You're the only person I could think of. The silence stretched between us like a live wire. I could hear the faint beeping of machines in the background, his shaky breath, the faint tremor of performance in his tone. Once upon a time, I would have rushed their panic tears, all of it. I would have been exactly who he needed me to be. But I'd finally learned that pity is not love, it's a leash. My voice came out calm, almost clinical. Franklin, are you safe with the medical staff? What, yes, but. Then you're where you need to be. Ruby, please, I hope you get the help you need, Franklin, I said quietly. Goodbye. And then I hung up. My hand didn't even shake. That afternoon, I went for a walk by the river. The air smelled like rain and freedom. My phone stayed silent in my pocket, and I smiled not from cruelty, but from peace. He had tried to pull me back into his chaos one last time, but I was done being someone's emergency exit. Some people call that heartless. I call it recovery. 6 months later, my life didn't feel like a recovery anymore. It felt like a new chapter. The sharp edges of the past had dulled into quiet lessons. I had moved to a brighter apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a small balcony where I kept herbs that somehow refused to die. And then there was Marcus. He wasn't lightning or chaos. He was sunrise, gentle, consistent, warm in a way that didn't scorch. We'd met at a landscape design seminar, bonded over our shared dislike of small talk, and started dating with no drama, no power plays, no mind games. I used to think love had to be painful to be real. Marcus proved otherwise. That Saturday morning, we sat at our favorite cafe downtown, a sun-washed place with plants hanging from the ceiling, and the smell of cinnamon in the air. We were sharing pancakes, laughing about a client who wanted to install a koi pond in his living room. For the first time in years, I was fully present. No ghosts, no lingering ache, just stillness. Then a hand touched my shoulder. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive, a grip that made my entire body go rigid before my mind even processed who it was. I turned slowly. Franklin. He looked older, but not in years and erosion. His hair was unkempt, his skin pale and uneven. His once sharp eyes were glassy, flickering between me and Marcus, like he couldn't decide which version of my life to destroy first. His clothes hung on him wrinkled and cheap, and there was a faint smell of cigarettes clinging to his jacket. Ruby, he said, voice trembling between desperation and disbelief. We need to talk. For a moment, the cafe's sounds blurred coffee machines' laughter, the hum of morning. Everything slowed. Then I exhaled. Franklin, this isn't a good time. It's never a good time for you anymore, is it? His voice cracked. My life is ruined. Sienna's gone. I lost my apartment, my car, everything. I'm waiting tables just to survive. I have nothing. He said it like a confession, like an accusation. He was waiting for pity. I didn't give it. I'm sorry to hear that, I said quietly, my tone polite, the same one I'd use with a stranger. He blinked, thrown off balance. That's it. You don't even care. Across the table, Marcus set down his fork, watching calmly, not intervening. His silence was protective, not passive. I could feel it, his quiet trust that I could handle this. I turned to him with a small, deliberate smile. Marcus, this is Franklin. Then back to Franklin. Franklin, this is Marcus. The introduction was surgical. It sliced through every illusion Franklin still had about who I belonged to or who I used to be. Franklin's jaw tightened. So this is what you replaced me with? I held his gaze. I didn't replace you. You replaced yourself. His voice rose. You don't get to just erase what we had, Ruby. After everything we've been through, after everything I went through, I corrected softly. You told me I was a placeholder, a safe option until your chaos came back. Well, chaos came back, and look where it got you. He flinched. Around us, a few cafe patrons glanced over, sensing tension, then politely looked away. The world kept spinning, indifferent to his drama. He took a step closer to the table, lowering his voice to a hiss. I was wrong. Okay. You were the only person who ever believed in me. I messed up, but I can fix it. I can. Franklin. My voice cut through his sentence, calm and sharp. No. He stared at me wide-eyed, like he hadn't prepared for that single word. I leaned back slightly, my posture relaxed, unthreatened. You keep mistaking my silence for an opening. It's not. It's closure. For a heartbeat, he stood there frozen, then tried again, his voice cracking. You can't just walk away like I'm nothing. I let out a slow breath, steady and final. You told me I was temporary. I just stopped waiting for you to realize what permanent looked like. Then deliberately, I turned back to Marcus, my tone softening, as if Franklin were already gone. So you were saying about the mountain trip in September? Marcus smiled faintly, picking up the thread. Yeah, I was thinking we drive up Friday night, avoid the traffic. That was it. The conversation resumed without Franklin in it. The silence that followed from his end was brutal. He stood there, a ghost in daylight, watching a world that had moved on without him. After a long pause, he whispered, You're really done, aren't you? I met his eyes one last time. I was done the night you called me a placeholder. I just didn't realize it yet. And then in a voice barely above a breath, I added, You wanted fire, Franklin. You got it. Don't be surprised it burned. He stepped back slowly, as if the weight of the truth finally landed. His lips parted, 100 things unsaid, and then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the noise of the street outside. I didn't watch him go. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. His touch was steady, warm grounding. You okay? He asked softly. I looked at him, at his quiet eyes, the sunlight glinting off his coffee cup, the ordinary peace of that moment, and smiled. Better than okay. Outside, the day went on as if nothing monumental had happened. But for me, it had. Because that was the day I realized closure isn't a conversation, it's a choice. As we finished our brunch, laughter returning easily between us, I caught my reflection in the cafe window. For the first time, the woman looking back didn't seem like someone surviving her past. She looked like someone standing in her own story, one no one else could rewrite. And that silence Franklin left behind, it wasn't empty. It was golden. After that morning at the cafe, the world didn't change, but mine did. It was like someone had quietly lifted a glass dome from over my life. The air felt cleaner, lighter. Every step I took afterward belonged only to me. Franklin didn't reach out again. Not through messages, not through mutual friends, not even through guilt. His absence was absolute, and I didn't miss him. In fact, I found myself wondering if he'd finally learned to live with his own silence the way I had learned to live with mine. A month later, I was on my balcony at sunset, watering the stubborn little rosemary plant that refused to die. The sky was that bruised violet that comes before night, the kind of color that makes you pause just to breathe it in. Marcus was inside, humming softly while he cooked dinner. I remember thinking how rare it was to feel safe in ordinary moments. I hadn't felt that kind of peace in years. When I turned off the watering can, my phone buzzed on the table beside me, a new number, no name. For half a second, my chest tightened, but this time I didn't flinch. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I watched the notification fade into silence. Some ghosts don't deserve an audience. Later that night, Marcus and I ate dinner by candlelight. Nothing fancy, just pasta and cheap red wine. He was telling me about a client who wanted to plant an orchard on the roof of a corporate building. I laughed, really laughed, and it startled me. It had been so long since laughter didn't feel like recovery. Halfway through dinner, Marcus reached across the table and brushed his thumb against my wrist. You disappear sometimes, he said gently. In your eyes, I mean. I smiled faintly. Old habit. He didn't press. He just nodded. Eyes soft with understanding. And that was the beauty of him. He didn't try to fix the parts of me that were still healing. He just gave them room to breathe. That night, after he'd fallen asleep, I stood by the window watching the lights of the city pulse like distant stars. My reflection in the glass looked calm, almost unfamiliar. The woman who once begged for scraps of attention now lived a life so peaceful it almost scared her. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to justify that peace. I thought about Franklin, the chaos, the fire, the noise. He'd called my love suffocating. But in truth, it was his own instability that had starved us both. He needed someone to burn for him. I had finally learned to shine without flames. That realization didn't come with anger. It came with quiet gratitude. Because if he hadn't called me a placeholder, I might still be holding space in a story that was never meant for me. The next morning, I woke up before Marcus, the early light spilling across the sheets. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began sketching designs for a new client, a rooftop garden for a small women's shelter. I wanted to fill it with resilient plants, lavender, rosemary, and sunflowers that always turn toward the light. Halfway through my sketch, I wrote a small note in the corner of the page, "Grow where you were once left waiting." I didn't know why I wrote it, but it felt like truth. Later that week, I walked through the park near my apartment, the same one I used to avoid, because it reminded me of the life Franklin and I once planned to build. But now the memory didn't sting. It just existed, like a chapter I'd finished and filed away. As I sat on a bench, watching children chase each other under the trees, I realized something. Healing doesn't look like erasing the past. It looks like remembering it without wanting to go back. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and sunlight, I finally understood that peace isn't the absence of pain, it's the mastery of it. That night, Marcus and I took a drive along the coast. The ocean shimmered under the moonlight, the air thick with salt and possibility. He reached for my hand as we drove, and I didn't think about the past, or the people who broke me to pieces, or the versions of myself that used to beg for love. I just thought about how beautiful it was to be seen without needing to be saved. When we stopped by a cliff overlooking the sea, Marcus turned to me with a soft smile. "You look peaceful," he said. I looked out at the horizon where the dark water met the faintest blush of dawn. "I am," I whispered. And I meant it. In the distance, the first light of morning touched the waves, soft, golden, alive. It spread slowly, steadily, until the whole sky glowed with quiet promise. The same golden silence I had built for myself. I wasn't anyone's placeholder anymore. I was